Hello and welcome to the Property Investor's Handbook. In today's episode, we're focusing on a critical issue for property managers and landlords, and that's handling rent arrears. So with expert insights from our seasoned property manager, Colleen Sutherland, we'll discuss effective strategies to prevent rent arrears and manage them when they do occur. Colleen, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Fantastic. Now, can you explain what rent arrears actually are and why they present, such a significant challenge for property managers?
Rent arrears can be just a couple of days, or then it can be 7 days plus. So to keep an eye on it when it's about 2 or 3 days is vital, and then notices start from the 8th day. And it's hard to keep bringing them back.
So these are the critical sort of times. So 7 days. So explain to me the process. So how is it flagged to you as a property manager that somebody hasn't paid?
Well, we've got reports. We keep an eye on it in our software, and we check them daily after we've done the receipting of what has been paid, and then check who hasn't paid. And it comes up from 3 days.
Right. Okay. So from 3 days, that's where and what sort of procedures do you have then for contacting the tenant, and what happen? What's the process once you get to that 3 days and somebody hasn't paid?
So the standard process right at the start is receive a text message to say your rent is in arrears 3 days, 4 days, and how much it is, just so that they can see it adding up by day, that they should be getting the rent paid. And then once they get to the 8th day and they haven't rectified their arrears, that's when the notices start. And people do get offended by it because it's like, I'm never in arrears, I don't know what's happened. And we listen to the stories, and there can be stories that are genuine.
Sure.
And we take that into consideration. And then there's stories as in their stories.
Right.
As to why they haven't paid their rent. So it's different between a tenant who's been there for a long time, and we assess, is this regular? Is it not regular? Are they flying just under the radar? Things like that. And then big alarm is when they've not long moved in. And we can do all the checks in the world. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be true and accurate when they're living in this rental property. And alarm bells ring when they're constantly 3+ days in arrears.
Well, this was going to be my next question. So are there people, and what do you do? So you're saying at 3 days is sort of where you flag it. They'll get notified. There isn't any official procedure, which I want to talk to about that 8 day plus. So what do you do, and does it happen where someone is just, let's just say 4 to 5 days every single week?
They do get the text messages, but if it's every single week and we see them paying late, they'll get a phone call simply because, hey, Mr. Tenant, you are always 4 or 5 days in arrears. We're going to have to get you to catch this up. You need to pay a minimum, because they're supposed to pay fortnightly in advance.
Right.
So what happens, it's like in the old days when we rented a DVD and you go to the shop and you pay your $10 to rent that movie. So you have to pay before you can take the movie out of their shop. And we explain it like that, is that you're about to use up 2 weeks worth of rent. So you need to pay me 2 weeks rent.
Yep.
And people don't quite understand that sometimes. They think they pay their 2 weeks rent, I put it in my pocket, and then you're paying what you've already used as opposed to what you're about to use. Because at the end of the tenancy, they're going to move out and they go, well, where's my 2 weeks rent?
Oh, really?
Yeah. And if we had a slush fund of people's 2 weeks rent, I'd be rich. But we don't, because they're not understanding they're paying the rent for what they're about to use, and you've used it up, so now you have to pay another 2 weeks rent.
You're not paying in arrears. You're not getting So understand.
So it's always a bugbear especially with the people who are on a very tight budget. which is a lot of people on today's market. And they think that they've got 2 weeks up their sleeve and they'll use that now. And it's
Right.
Then we go through the process of explaining that's not how it works.
Sure. Talk to me about the official procedure from day 8. Where I know that at some point there's got to be a breach, I believe. So explain to me. Day 8 comes around, an official notice. What happens from there?
So you'll get a text message between day 3 and day 7. And if you've chosen to ignore that, not ring me and tell me why, on day 8, you'll get a notice to remedy breach. Now, those notices stay on your history file so that when you go to find another rental property, I'm obliged to tell the next agent, yes, but they've had 4 rent arrears breaches. So don't get to that stage because that will affect your
ability
future,
to find another property.
Yeah, secure another property. So day 8. So that gives you 7 days to bring your rent up to date, meaning don't just pay 1 week's rent. Up to date means 2 weeks' rent in advance. And you've signed that on the lease.
On the lease.
And then we get to the end date, and the very next day after that expires, if you've not paid your rent, then I have to start QCAT proceedings, which is the Queensland Civil and Administrative Tribunal,
yep,
to have the lease terminated. I don't go the jugular straight up because there are extenuating circumstances and we do understand. But if you're a serial late payer, then you leave me with no choice but to get the rent brought up, especially if it's a property, over $750 a week.
Yep.
I can take however much bond once it's over that. But at $750 a week and you're 2 weeks in arrears,
Yep.
that's a lot of money and it adds up very quickly. And that's why you have to pay or you should be paying a higher bond because everything adds up quickly.
Sure.
Yeah.
So talk to me about someone who finds themselves in difficult financial circumstances. We hear that there's, banks always say with loans, if you talk to us, we'll help, we'll work something out. Electricity companies. Is there anything there for, in place that you can do for someone who's genuinely experiencing hardship and is having trouble paying and staying up to date with their payments, or is it a case of, well, look,
Too bad, so sad.
Yeah.
It's not. If you're proactive in letting your property manager know that what the circumstances are and when you will be able to bring that rent up to date. And then it's up to the landlord to either accept that or decline it. But 9 times out of 10, they do accept it. And then with people who aren't proactive, then it's a little bit more harsh. Or you could go on to a payment plan, meaning you'll continue to pay your full 2 weeks rent, but then you pay an extra that will go towards the week that you've not paid.
Right. So there are things that you can do. Do you have to consult with your property owners at when something like that occurs?
Yes. So the owner will always know if the tenant is in arrears, if that's what they choose. Otherwise, they just leave it up to us to do.
Sure.
Once we've organised a plan with the tenant to bring the rent up to date, we'll let the owner know. So we can make those agreements outside the tenancy agreement. However, if you fail to meet that agreement, then that one goes to court. So make sure what you're signing off on, that you'll pay an extra $100 a week until the rent's caught up. Make sure that you do that, because that will look more favourably for you in QCAT to say, well, I'm trying.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. You mentioned earlier that, if you do find yourself in rent arrears and beyond that 7-8 day mark, and that you have to, as I said, put a mark on their file. I'd like to know a bit more about that. So when someone goes to rent another property, how does that work? Do agents contact previous agents, or is there a master database where these things are recorded? How does that let's just say you've had this tenant who 3 or 4 times got past that stage, left. when and how does that information get passed to their when they're looking for their next property?
So we'll get a rental reference request from their new agent when they're looking to move. And sometimes that's how we find out they're moving. We get a rental reference request, and on that request there is certain questions. And one of the questions is, has the tenant ever been arrears? Have you had to issue a breach notice? How many?
Right.
And we answer truthfully. There's some agents that may not be as truthful, only just to sort of move the tenant out. And
Really?
that's how
So
we adopt someone who is not necessarily the best.
Right.
But mostly it's good. But yes, those arrear notices will flag when I go to do a
Sure.
rental reference.
Is that a standard? See, this again comes back, as we always do in these episodes, Colleen, to why you need a property manager like yourself to handle all this. I mean, if you think about an owner putting in a new tenant doesn't even know to get a rental reference. I gather that's standard procedure for all good property managers.
Yes, all good property managers will do that due diligence before they present that application to the landlord for consideration. And landlords who are managing the property themselves don't necessarily know to ask or what to ask the previous agent, and don't necessarily do those due diligence, and
Right.
then you do end up with the possible tenant from hell that's on a current affair. So
Yep.
there are extenuating circumstances there.
Yep. Well, this is what I wanted to we're going on a bit of a tangent here, but it is interesting. I'm sure our listeners are keen to understand this. So I thought there was a database or a blacklist, let's call it that, for want of a better term, of these current affair tenants who've, trashed property after property. So, and just bring it back even to breaches. So there isn't a database as such that you lodge every time there's a breach. There's a little mark that goes on that database, and hence any leasing agent can go and have a look at that database. Is there one? Isn't there one? And where is this blacklist, or isn't there one?
There is a national tenancy database. There's a couple where we are able to put on list the tenant if they owe money for rent arrears, but there is a certain period of time. So you can't just do it every time you issue a notice, or even, I don't like that tenant, I'm going to blacklist you.
Yep.
There's a lot of rules now that's been introduced around blacklisting, for want of a better word, the tenant. So you don't want to be seen to be hindering that tenant to get another home for their family, but we do have to be doing the right thing by the next agent and listing them. But there's a certain period of time that we're allowed to list. They can apply to question that listing, but yes, there is a couple of tenancy databases, and that's what forms part of our due diligence. They might be on that tenancy database, but they may have cleared a debt and then not be taken off. So there's extenuating circumstances too to tenants on these particular blacklists.
Sure. So would I be right in assuming then, from what you're saying, is you'd only put someone on there for something quite, what you'd consider quite serious, and other lesser serious, like ongoing small arrears, it might be something you bring up in a rental reference.
Correct, yes. So again, there is a certain time period, so we can't do it straight away. And, if it goes to QCAT, then yes, we can do it. So there's a lot of structure around that now. Years ago, there was agents putting all the tenants on there, and ones they didn't like, it could be a personality conflict or something like that, and it's like, you can't do that.
Yep.
And now they've got a structure around that.
And guidelines on what can, what can't, when, how.
Yes. So,
how long.
For instance, however, we can't put the domestic violence victim on there ever, even though they may have been horrendously in arrears, but there is an extenuating circumstance there. And domestic violence is a whole different ball game and in particular with rent arrears
Sure.
and damage. So that's why we suggest a very good landlord's protection insurance.
Sure. I'd love to ask the question about how far as it goes from not paying rent, so getting into arrears before the process of eviction starts, but I'm not going to, because we're going to be doing another episode on evictions.
Yes.
And so if you want to know the answer to that question, you're going to have to tune into our next episode. So
that'll be an interesting one.
It will. So, look, I think that really wraps us up for rental arrears. And look, it's just comes to me every time. You talk about how you do this. You've got structure, you've got software, you've got processes in place. You do this all day, every day for your whole portfolio of properties. But how the heck you'd ever stay on top of this as an own private landlord, I don't know. So
it's very time consuming, yes.
It would be. And then just the cost, we talk about every time, don't we, Colleen, the cost of what it will cost you if something does go wrong. It's peace of mind. We talk about you and your team and good property management agencies being an insurance policy.
Correct.
And you certainly are. So, look, thank you very much for joining me and giving us your insights on rental arrears. Hopefully it's not something that's too common and you have to deal with on an ongoing basis, but when you do it well. And that's why anyone listening, jump in and talk to Colleen and her team. Get her on board to manage your properties. Now, look, don't forget to jump on and hit subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. Make sure you hear every episode that we do and getting more insights on successfully managing your investments. So join us next time as we continue to guide you through these complexities. Thanks again, Colleen.
Thanks, Adam.